A quick note before we get into the episode. Oversharing is a podcast for entertainment purposes only. It is not a medical podcast and does not constitute medical or psychological advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or mental health professional.
All right, let's get into some intention. Hi, Jordana and Dr. Naomi. I'm writing in today for an intention. I'm a first-time mom to a beautiful 5-month baby girl. Before getting pregnant, me and my husband would talk about having a big family, 3 or 4 kids. But after having one, we've had to face the reality that might not be in the cards for us. We both found the parenting experience extremely challenging, both physically and mentally. Postpartum was really hard, and the adjustment period was so much harder than we had anticipated. We live in a different country from both of our families, so we've definitely missed having a support system around. After 5 months, we are really enjoying the experience and are settling into our new dynamic and family life. But it has really made us question whether we can and want to do it again. We value our relationship and independence a lot, and we want to keep prioritizing our marriage. I know it's still early on and we might change our minds later. Either way, we don't have to commit to anything now. But I found that this has taken up a lot of space in my mind. I'm constantly thinking about it, wondering how we could possibly handle having another kid, thinking what our life would look like if we only had one. So I need an intention to put all this to rest and enjoy the present, knowing I don't have to make any decisions yet. And when the time comes, we'll know what's right for our family. Thanks for everything you do, and looking forward to hearing what you think. A maybe one and done mom. We get a lot of emails like this about like the anxiety of choosing how many children to have. I think people think about that a lot. I think there's like this sense of like, you know, because you can't know what it's like both ways, like a feeling of, will I regret this choice one way or the other?
Totally. I do think more people are sure that they either want kids or don't want kids. And
Right.
So the decision to even, I mean, that's a hard decision too, when you're ready for your first kid is kind of a hard decision for some people, but it's more nuanced and a little bit harder to decide if you want more than one. I hear people talk about like this feeling of like this baby, what they're saying, like this is harder than we thought. And we're kind of feel a little maxed out. And we also want to have time for our relationship. But I hear a lot kind of like this baby is so perfect and amazing and like wonderful. And they sleep and they, you know, how could
Right.
we ever, we're never going to have one that's as amazing as this one, or I'm never going to be able to bond with another one, or having another one is going to take my attention away from this one.
And then, I mean, this isn't in this email, but I see this a lot also in the emails is like one partner
wants
another one. And the other one is like, this was a lot. I think I'm okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I agree. I think that have to have kids or not have kids, people feel like, I think most people feel, I think, a little bit stronger in their ideas about that. But the idea of like how many can be stressful.
Yeah.
Also.
Totally. Yeah. So this is a tough question. The good news is it sounds like they're both on the same exact page,
right,
like you said, which is great. They're both kind of like, oh, we thought this, now we think this. She speaks in a we, like as if they're really aligned on everything. So that's a strength. Again, my advice for this is going to be to acknowledge the fear. Like I think she's doing, first of all, you're still in postpartum. Your baby's 5 months old. Like I would say 6 months is what I would consider like your postpartum, even all the way up to a year before you start to feel like emotionally back to how you were before. Certainly physically, I think there's that time period. So I think you're still early on to be feeling like you need to make this decision. And she knows it. She gives herself her own intention. Like she knows what to do. She says, you know, enjoy the present, knowing I don't have to make any decisions yet. And when the time comes, we'll know what's right for our family. So she knows that she doesn't need to make any decisions yet. I think she knows that eventually the decision will come to them. But I think the part that she's skipping is maybe like what we talked about again at the top of the episode, allowing herself some time to sit in the fear on both sides of it. Like the fear of if we don't have another kid and this is an only child, a lot of people have fears about that. Like, are they going to be lonely? What's going to happen to them when we die? They're not going to have any siblings. Like, all these like big existential fears about having an only child, or maybe they'll be selfish or whatever.
Or we're like mourning this story of we both went into this thinking we'd have this. I mean, 3 or 4 kids is a lot of kids. So like, when they went in saying 3 or 4 and they decide to have 1, that is like a big 180.
Totally. It's an example of this thing where you like picture like you said, mourning, like I picture my life in this way. And now I'm having to potentially reimagine
the story,
my future, which is what happens when you're like, I moved in with this person and we're going to get married and I see my future and like, this is my person. And then you get broken up with, you're like, whoa, now I have to just completely take a left and like reimagine this future that I had written for myself. Especially because it sounded like, again, they both agreed they wanted 3 or 4. So it's like, okay, that's happening. We agree, we're going to do it. So I think that is really hard, like reimagining the future. But I would sit with the fear of, not verbally, not like in this ruminating way. But if you think about this reimagining the future, what do you feel in your body? Like just allowing that to be there. The fear of like, we end up with only 1 kid. And then I would allow yourself to sit with the fear of having more than 1 and being sleep deprived and, not in a sense that it's going to help her make a decision. Because I don't know, like, I'm not saying that doing that is going to help her decide. I just think doing that is going to make her less anxious and ruminating about the decision. Because again, these feelings are trying to be seen. These fears are trying to have a voice, or that fear energy wants to run through her body. And I think she's stopping it and then like turning it into this ruminating mental exercise about whether or not they should have another kid.
And then she can also like really, if she does that and kind of like gets it out of her system to an extent, she can really live in the reality of what it's like to be a parent in that moment.
Yeah.
Good and the bad.
Yes, exactly. Some of these fears are so big and heavy and hard that you want to avoid feeling it. And it's like we talk about the mortality meditation, or we have before, it's like, it's really big and heavy and hard to sit in this like moment where you're taking your last breath and you're saying goodbye to all your loved ones. And, it's like really intense to go there. But one of the nice things about it is you get to come out of the meditation and kind of be like, oh my gosh, I'm alive. I have like all day today to be alive and probably tomorrow. So you kind of can come out of it and be like, all right, this is great. I have, I don't have 2 babies I'm screaming at the same time and I'm not waking up in the middle of the night, or I don't have to deal with like the existential fear of my child, like dying alone because we didn't give them a sibling or whatever, that fear is. Like right now we're just sitting on the floor on the playmat, like, having a good time.
Yeah.
So you get to kind of go in there and come out of it. But I think it's more about letting the energy kind of run through and letting your emotional self heal without doing all the mental gymnastics about needing to take an action and decide we're having a baby, we're not having a baby. They're 5 months old. Like you do not need to really make this decision. She knows it. I think it's more these fears are popping up. So give them some
she feels like she needs
airtime.
to solve them.
Yes.
Which is not the case, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, did she write her own intention, or do you have a...
Oh, yes, I do. I do have an intention for her. No, she kind of did, but I wrote, I will acknowledge and allow my fears and trust that life will unfold in line with our hearts. So acknowledge the fears. And the part that she knows is that it's going to unfold in line with their hearts. The part that she needs to do is acknowledge the fears. And I think she can just sit with that a little bit. Maybe together they can do that.
Yeah. Sounds like a nice weekend activity. Let's do some triggers. Why don't you read our first one?
Okay. Dear Dr. Naomi and Jordana, I love the pod and look forward to listening every week. I'm writing in with a triggered scenario that happened to me recently. For context, I just turned 35 and was diagnosed with celiac disease earlier this year. It took years to receive the diagnosis, including many different doctors, appointments, invasive procedures, and tests to figure out what was going on. By the time I was diagnosed, I had to have 5 rounds of iron infusions because I was so anemic on top of all the other symptoms it was causing. While I am proud of how I immediately adjusted my diet and overall took it in stride, there's still lingering food grief that hangs over me when I think of things I enjoyed before the diagnosis that I'll never have again. While I'm glad to live in a time with so many substitutions, I'm here to tell you that most gluten-free versions just don't hit the same. It's so layered and something I have to think about every day when I'm eating, especially when I'm eating out or at a friend's house. It has made me a more compassionate, empathic person, and it's also a total bummer. I can recognize my own misconception of this disease before getting diagnosed, but there are serious implications if it isn't managed or if I accidentally consume it. Anyway, on to the triggered portion. I celebrated my birthday last week and opened a birthday card from my brother and sister-in-law who live far away. The card says, "You're a grown-ass adult. Eat as much birthday pizza as you damn well please." And on the inside, it says, "Just don't forget the antacids," with a bunch of pizza slices all over it. I felt so triggered. I thought of all the cards in the world, this is the one that made the cut. I love receiving birthday cards and love picking them out for other people. And this was the winner? Hi, happy birthday. Here's a reminder of the food you can never have again. I know they weren't trying to hurt my feelings, but what the hell? How triggered can I be? Signed, a gluten-free forever Betch.
Sorry to laugh.
Ugh.
Okay. I mean, I think we've gotten not obviously this exact triggered, but I do think there's maybe like a cultural feeling about like gluten-free or celiac and a feeling of like it doesn't feel like that big of a deal. And I will, throw myself under the bus and say like, I think until reading a lot of these emails, that was sort of my mindset. Like I have a friend who's gluten-free, but she doesn't really she seems to be fine. I don't know. Like maybe she's not telling me about stuff. So I guess I could understand why someone would do this and think it wasn't a huge deal and they were just kind of having fun with something that you were
Right.
going for. And they're like, oh, this is such a great card for this person because they're, they have all these new food sensitivities and it's kind of funny.
Right.
But I can also understand the other side of something where it's like you don't really know these people don't know like exactly how much sort of medical trauma you've had to go through to deal with this and how like it's actually not been easy for you to adjust and it's either not funny or in my opinion maybe just like a little too soon.
Yeah.
Send the card.
Right.
Like she might think this is funny in like 5 years and she said she was diagnosed earlier this year. So maybe she hasn't like fully figured out how to live her life in this way with this, is it a disease, disorder? I don't know what you would call it. A celiac disease.
Right.
She hasn't fully like figured it out yet and she's still struggling. So I think maybe it is something she might take a little lighter once she's adjusted to this new life, which I'm sorry she has to go through. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, and she even says in the email, like she's grown more empathic as a result of this, that she probably didn't realize what this is. I think the hard part also is there are a bunch of these GI disorders. There's like, celiac, and then there's just a gluten allergy. And there's some people who just like don't feel great when they eat gluten. And then there's Crohn's disease. And there's like all these different iterations of gluten sensitivity that I think there is someone maybe like your friend that's just like, yeah, I get a little tummy ache when I eat pizza, but like, fuck it, I'm eating pizza. There's that person. And then there's this person that literally like will damage her intestines and like needs to go for transfusions if she eats gluten. So I think there's such a wide spectrum of people that need gluten-free options that sometimes, or there's even parents that are just like, I want to give my kid gluten-free and see if they like behave better or, whatever. There's like so many versions of this that it's hard for people to know what's serious and what's
Right.
not.
And they live far away, she said. So it's not like they've been out to dinner with her where she's been like kind of upset about not being able to order stuff on the menu, or maybe they're not getting the ins and outs of how annoying this is. They just
Yes.
heard she was like gluten-free now.
Yes, totally. And I do think it's kind of probably on her to let people know. I get it, like I think we all get it. Even if you're like, okay, I'm going to try not to eat like all the Halloween candy that's in my house, when it's sitting in front of me, it's challenging and it's hard to have foods in front of you that, especially for her, there is like a never again component, which is hard.
Right. It's not like a diet where you're like, I'll have not today, but I'll have my cheat day.
Right. Exactly. There is, I think, some grief and like this feeling of I will never again. I think that's why, when addicts are sort of like, I can never drink alcohol ever again, there is this grief component. And that's why sometimes they'll go with more of like a just for today mindset, because the never again mindset is like too much to take in. So you just have to kind of go day by day. But for her, I think she does know that this is like, I'll never have a slice of non-gluten-free pizza ever again. So I get it, but I do think it's kind of on her to let people know what she's going through if they're people that are close to her. And she doesn't want to receive a card like this again, which she doesn't. And if she doesn't let them know, I'm not saying she has to say this card hurt my feelings necessarily, but I think in a separate phone call, she can say, this has been really challenging for me to not be able to, if you love these certain cupcakes from this place and you can never ever eat them again, like it's tough. But I do think this points to this general, what you're describing, other people that do not suffer from these illnesses,
Right.
not getting that it's really hugely impactful. You eat 3 meals a day plus snacks, which is like all those times a day that you have to think about every morsel of food.
Right. Or the consequence of not doing it right is, in addition to it's what it sounds like was extensive medical testing that she had to go through, probably while really uncomfortable to even get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we know, like if you just wrote in, I'm gluten-free, and I think even for this email, like if she just wrote into the email and said, I'm gluten-free and my brother and my sister-in-law sent me this card, we'd be like, you're overreacting. But because she gave all the context, it did seem a lot more insensitive.
Yes.
So,
and maybe again, if the brother does know about like transfusions and, which he probably does, which is why this is triggering to her. But I guess unless you're in it, you don't really get how hard it is to have that. I'll never eat. I can never just walk into a pizza place ever again and get like just a slice of pizza like a normal person. And I always have to be that person that's like asking for the gluten-free and saying, hey, I can't eat at that place because.
Right. Yeah, that does stink.
Yeah. So I get it. I don't think it's about the card. I think you need to maybe just let him know that this is like something that you've been through. And it feels, and we've talked about this before, like he just doesn't know you by sending, like he's kind of doing this thing of like, I know you.
Right.
Here's this, you can't eat pizza card. And she's like, no, you don't get it at all. Like I feel completely unseen by this card.
Should she say that?
No.
Okay.
I don't think she should say that because I don't think he meant anything. I think that was his way of being like, hey, I remember what you've been through this whole year. Like, here's this funny card. Like, go eat pizza. Enjoy yourself for your birthday.
Right.
Like,
have a cheat day. Yeah.
Have a cheat day. Right. I think is what he's trying to say. And it felt, she's like, out of all the cards, and he probably picked it up and was like, this one's perfect. She can't eat pizza. Have an antacid.
Right. It's like reminds me of some Sex and the City episode where like Carrie's like really upset about turning 35 or something, and they get her like the old maid card game. Or something.
Right. It's like, we know you, but a little off. We're a little off.
Well, we know that you're like, that this is a thing that you're thinking about, but we don't know exactly like how much
deep it's
how
hitting.
deep it's run. So I don't think they're doing it to be cruel. I think they thought they were doing it because they knew you, but a little too soon. I think this were sent like 5 years in. Maybe
Right.
she'd think it was funnier because it's the same year and she went through all this stuff. I'll give it a 5.
Yeah. I was going to say I'll give it a 5, but what I would also say is your irritation with this is letting you know that you should probably just maybe have a conversation with your brother and let him know, like, not necessarily in relation to the card, because I wouldn't, critique it. I don't think he meant anything by it, but on a separate note, like you said, they don't eat together, but this is really hard. This is a hard, big life adjustment. And, this is just what I'm going through. But yeah, I would agree. A 5. I could see why it's triggering, but I don't think it was malicious or mean. I think it was just a little aloof.
Yes. Agreed. All right. Let's do one more. This one's a voicemail. Thanks for leaving a voicemail. We'll love that. Let's roll the tape.
Hi, Jordana and Dr. Naomi. I have a triggered scenario for you. Thanks so much for the show you put out. I love your show. This triggered is around wedding etiquette. So my husband and I were invited to a wedding a little over a year ago. It was a college friend of his that he hadn't really kept in touch. He was like 31 or 32 at the time, so college was a long time ago. We'd invited him and his fiance to our wedding, but they weren't able to make it. He's like in the NFL, so he was very busy. So my husband ends up being asked to be a groomsman in his wedding, which he thought was like a little weird given that they haven't seen each other since college, but he thought it would be fun and he said yes. He went to the bachelor party and then we were invited to the wedding too, obviously, which was out of town. We live in New York. The wedding was in Texas. So they had a rehearsal dinner on Friday night and then the wedding was Sunday night. I was like, we're not going to the rehearsal dinner on Friday. Let's just go to the wedding. We already have to miss Monday for a travel day. We're not that close. We're skipping that. So we get there Saturday. First triggering scenario that happened is that my husband gets invited to like a groomsman night out. So I had traveled all the way there and like the wives weren't invited. That event didn't actually end up happening because I think it was just a last minute plan and they like ended up not being able to pull it off. So then the next day was the wedding, I'm alone all day. My husband's out doing groomsmen stuff. I show up later. It was 100 degrees. I'm sitting outside forever, like waiting for the ceremony to start, sweating. That's besides the point. Then I go to pick up my seating card after the ceremony and I see that my card says like guest of my husband. Like they had the audacity to like not even put my name after I flew all the way there. And then even worse than that, I was at a different table than my husband. So there was like a bridesmaid and a groomsman table. And the groomsman table was like all the way on the other side of the room from my table. So yeah, that's the trigger scenario. Flew all the way to a wedding. Wasn't invited to like the night before festivities. Was called guest instead of being referred to by my name, and wasn't seated anywhere near my husband during the actual wedding. So how triggered would you be? We also ended up getting invited to a wedding from another one of his college friends, like shortly after that. And it said like his name and guest. Blew my mind again. And we just like immediately said no. And I was like, I'm not traveling to a wedding ever again if it's someone that we're not close to. So yeah, so let me know what you think. Thanks.
Okay.
What blows my mind is the seating card. They gave her her own separate seating card that just said guest of husband.
Yeah, that's rude.
Like I could see, not even, but sort of, if they had
he's
them
a groomsman?
both. Right. If they had it like, whatever it is, David Smith and guest table 14 is one thing, but like David Smith on a card for table 2 and then guest of David Smith on a card for like table 26, like, yeah, that is really strange.
I feel like as you were writing that, you would think this does not feel like right. Yeah. Okay. Let's go through the triggers. The night before thing with the men going out, I don't think that triggering. Like, it's a night. You can like order room service, hang out, do your own thing. I can understand why they would do that and not be like, well, what are the wives going to do?
Right.
I think that's fine. 100 degrees, you're waiting outside for a while. The ceremony happens all the time. I can't tell you how many weddings I've been to where I've been like, is this fucking thing going to start at any
Right.
point? Or
I'm
like,
sweating.
can I go to the bathroom? I would like
Right.
some water, whatever it
Yes.
is. So I think that one, par for the course, wedding things get delayed. People, that's not personal.
Right.
Guest and guest card and sitting at a different table than your husband at a wedding where you don't know anyone
Yes.
is very triggering.
That part is the triggering part because there's for a few reasons. One, when you're setting up a wedding, most people do think about the experience of their guests. And you
Right.
do think about the idea of like some people don't know anybody here. And even when you're making tables, you're kind of like, oh, let me put this person with this person because they kind of know each other adjacent. Like that's usually a thought. You're not just like randomly throwing people at tables. So there should be a thought of like, this person, his partner doesn't know anybody here.
Right.
Even if they just put the two tables right next to each other, I think that would have been
Somehow,
better.
yeah. But yeah. No, I could see being really annoyed about that. Like you flew all the way to a different state and you're sitting at a table where you don't know anyone after spending the whole day alone.
Right.
Yeah. I think I can understand. Like, listen, I've seen weddings where there's like the groomsmen are at a certain table and the bridesmaids are at a certain table, but you always do it with their plus ones.
Right.
And I get it. Sometimes it's like a little weird and funny where it's like you're at your husband who like doesn't, or your husband or maybe your new boyfriend is at like the bride's table and they've met like one time and it's a little weird. And I think we've all had that or been that, but it's kind of like whatever. It's not like you're sitting them right next to you. They're like at the table and like they're not taking anything away. I would never separate a couple at a wedding.
Yeah.
If you want to do a bridesmaids groomsmen table, you have to account for their plus ones.
Right. Unless you happen to have a group of people where like all the women are a friend group and they all know each other and the men are a friend group and they all know each other and you know that ahead of time, then I could see that maybe working out. But when people are bringing someone, not only that you are not a friend group, but you don't even know her name to put it on the invitation. Yeah, that is.
And it's rude not to just get her. I mean, they're married. It's not like I could understand maybe doing that if it's like your friend who's kind of like, I'm kind of seeing this girl. Can I bring her to the wedding? And you're like, I can't really find any social media with her name on it. I feel weird asking when they're married.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
If you don't know someone's wife's name, they shouldn't be your groomsmen. You're not that close.
Totally. Yeah. Or like, I think the other part of this, and I've seen this before that's triggering, is there is something about like this person who was getting married just almost wanted the friend as he was in college. He wanted him as his single college self. That's how he wanted him to really show up. And I think she felt that like he's not embracing or wanting to get to know his new life and his new partner. And I think with these types of things, that's what's really triggering is like, you don't care to know me or know like anything about my current life. You're almost wanting like a time capsule version of me that doesn't include this new person or have zero desire to get to know them. Like, I think that is offensive when you're rekindling an old relationship, but it just feels like blinders on to the fact that this might be a new person with a significant other and zero interest in getting to know them or even know their literal name.
Which sounds exactly what's happening here. I mean, he made him groomsmen. They didn't even invite him to their wedding. So maybe he just needed bodies.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Again, I think it was almost like he was just being used for this wedding and she had to just like be dragged along for the ride and just felt like baggage, which I could see why doesn't feel great. It doesn't sound like this new friendship is going to be like blossoming into anything because I do think it's important to try to get to know, like, I think this happens sometimes even with, someone when you have kids and there's someone else that knew you before you had kids or a significant other that's just like, I have no desire to know your kids, to know anything about your kids. Like, or, it's the same thing as not asking someone about their work or not asking someone about, it's just like part of caring about someone is caring about the things that they care about, which is his wife and her like actual experience in life, that she's a person. So, yeah.
And I could see why she's like, I'm not going to another wedding that you're not close for someone who writes and guests to a married person. They're not close enough to know the name of their wife. You shouldn't have to go to their destination wedding.
Totally. You want to, take a half an hour ride and show up and have a good time at a party. Great. But I agree. Like a whole weekend for someone that doesn't even take the time to know your name is quite
married. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the formality of it feels like stupid to get stuck on, but I think
it's a signal.
It's a signal. And because of the whole table thing at the end, it's like they literally didn't care what kind of an experience she had at this wedding at all.
Yeah.
And almost like wanted to pull this old version, this 10-year-old version of the husband out. That's what they wanted. And that's why they probably wanted like the guy's night out. I mean, you said that's not triggering at all. I don't know. I'm not in really the wedding world, but I feel like when people are showing up with their partners to have like basically a bachelor party the night before the wedding.
Yeah. They're not invited to. I guess a little bit. I think it depends on, I think I might be like, okay, great. I'll like go to the spa or
right. I could like not have to socialize for this and just relax.
I'd almost rather that than like going to an event that another event that I didn't really know anyone. Like, okay, this is like for you, you go out, I'll like enjoy the city or whatever it is.
I get that. I would prefer if it was kind of set up like that beforehand. So you kind of know what to expect instead of like you're showing up and you're kind of like, all right, we're all hanging out. And then it's like, all right, now you go home and we're going to continue the party without you.
Yeah. I mean, that didn't happen. So I guess whatever. But I don't know. I'd give this like a 6. 6.5 maybe.
Yeah. I'll give it a 6.5. I mean, in all reality, she sat there. She, probably good practice for her, talk to people, make new friends. I have a feeling she didn't. She was probably pretty grumpy and like unapproachable. If I had to guess, maybe she did. And sometimes it is nice to just kind of practice this being alone and trying to make friends and like doing that hard thing. But yeah, I would agree. This is,
she could practice that locally next time. I could imagine.
Yeah, totally. Take a day off work for it too. Right. Yeah. Triggering. 6.5.
All right. Well, that's our show. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back next week.
That's our time.
Great work today.